I was invited by the largest political party in our canton to talk about Bitcoin at their party meeting. I had 15 minutes, so I told them I'm very grateful that you're giving me 5 times as much time as Microsoft gave to Michael Saylor. And within that presentation, I think I was able to convince the whole, not the whole party, but the majority of the party, which was a bit critical before, to be now the majority to be in favor of pro-Bitcoin legislation. So it's a step-by-step, and actually the votes on the 3 ideas or proposals that we put forward that did not pass, it was quite close. So we almost had a majority for that. And this shows me that Bitcoin adoption is really picking up speed, and people want to inform themselves, and once they get good information, most of them are very open to Bitcoin then once they really are open to receive high quality information.
Hello guys, welcome once again to Bitcoiner Podcast. Today is the last episode of the year, but it doesn't matter because you're watching this on 2025. So actually this is the second episode of 2025. So let's do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. We started quite strong the year. I wanted to bring, politics news. It's always changing a lot. In 2024, we have seen that since Trump won the election in the United States, it just happened to be the fire that we needed of the spark that we started in El Salvador. With the Bitcoin adoptions, we have seen in the past few months, been discussing a lot about the Bitcoin strategic reserves. Politicians are making efforts to bring Bitcoin adoptions in their countries. There's a lot of effort to integrate also mining into their own states or community in cantons, depending on where you are. So today we're gonna talk about that. So I want to welcome Samuel Kullmann. He's from the Parliament of Switzerland, and also Joel. He is the face of Relay. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you very much, Juan. It's good to be on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Juan.
So guys, so there's a lot of things to discuss. And so first of all, I always like to start a podcast. If for the people that are new or don't know much about you, if you can share a little bit about your background, and then we will discuss a bit about how you understand Bitcoin and basically your Bitcoin journey. So I don't know, Samuel, if you can start by sharing a little bit about your background, and then you, Joel.
Sure. So I'm 38 years old. I live in Thun, Switzerland, which is a bit south of the capital city of Bern. I was born in the United Kingdom and grew up in Mongolia. And now I've been living in Switzerland for 22 years. I've also been active since that time. So I've been active for most of my life in politics. And 8 years ago, I was elected to the Parliament of Canton of Bern, where I'm still serving, and I'm also on the finance committee. And I've been a Bitcoiner first gradually since 2016. The suddenly moment was in 2020 when I read the Bitcoin standard. And especially since 2021, I've been very public about being a Bitcoiner, being also a politician who is pro-Bitcoin. And so I think I'm one of the most knowledgeable politicians in Switzerland who's knowledgeable about Bitcoin and active in that regard.
That's awesome. And what about you, Joel?
Perfect. So I'm Joël. I was actually also born and raised in Bern, not too far where Samuel just mentioned he's on the committees from and where he's active in politics. Used to be in the media world and got fed up with this. I discovered Bitcoin long time ago, well, it feels like a few decades, but it's over a decade at this point. And just used it as a magic internet money first, and then moved into actually using it as a debit card replacement, and then found the rabbit hole and stuck with it as a store of value or something to save in and as a better form of money for the future. And these days I work at Relay. I'm the press spokesperson and the public face. So you see me a lot in videos where I often get the chance to talk about Bitcoin Switzerland and Bitcoin in Europe and Bitcoin and the world as a general.
That's awesome. Yeah, by the way, guys, Joel is going to be half host and half guest today. So you're open to make questions as well to Samuel. And so, yeah, I was thinking that before talking about the politics and Bitcoin, I want to know, probably for people that are not so familiar with how politics works in Switzerland. I just thinking that I think it works different that, for example, El Salvador. I live in Spain. I know how it works here, but also it's way different than how it works, I think, in the United States, right? Because in the United States, they have the states and they have the laws in the states and then the federal level. So you work with cantons, right? Because you have cantons. So if someone can explain to us how it works, the regulation, or in general, the politics in Switzerland.
Sure. So Switzerland is a very interesting case study because we have a very, very unique political system in the world. And I would like to highlight three aspects of that. So one aspect is what you, Juan, mentioned, is with the cantons, which are like provinces. So in this regard, we are not too different from the United States, from Germany, from Canada, for example. But our cantons, our provinces, have a high degree of political autonomy, and most taxpayers' money is also spent on the cantonal level, which I think is a good thing because it's easier for a citizen to know a member of the cantonal parliament than to know a member of the national parliament. So politics is closer to the people, and if more money is being spent on the level that is closer to the people, I think it's better. Or for everyone. Then the second aspect, which is quite unique, is direct democracy. Other nations have direct democracy as well, but Switzerland practices it to a very, very high degree. So in the past 180 years, Swiss citizens have voted on more policy issues than almost all of the world combined in that time. So we regularly vote like 4 times a year on, let's say, 1 to 5 policy issues, which are binding. And by the means of referendum and popular initiative, we can force political topics on the agenda. And as a matter of fact, towards the end of this year, or like end of 2024, we're about to launch a popular initiative which wants to put Bitcoin into the Constitution of Switzerland, by specifying in one article of the Swiss constitution that our central bank has to have reserves in gold, which is already now the case, and we want to add 2 words, and Bitcoin. So we will use this direct democratic mean to bring about a nationwide debate on Bitcoin. And then if we get 100,000 valid signatures, all of the citizens can vote on our proposal and decide whether this should be in our constitution or not. Then the third aspect of our political system is very unique. No other country in the world has it, which is the concept of power sharing. So at the government level, we don't have one strong president or strong prime minister, but we have 7 ministers who share power equally. And therefore, this serves to give power to different minorities, to different interest groups. And so I believe this aspect has made Switzerland the politically most stable country in the world in the past 180 years, which of course was a good foundation for our economic growth and prosperity.
That's interesting. Joel, do you want to ask something?
I think on the last point, even there was only one case after World War II where the federal council essentially had a little bit more power than we did like as citizens. So even there, we were able to hold a vote and, turn the tides around. Having a dictatorship government or something like this is not possible with us. If there would be signs, I can guarantee that the population would be the first one to hold a referendum, hold a vote, and get the record set the record straight. So yeah, that's quite interesting. I now live in Austria, and it's a complete opposite. They have democracy on paper, but no one is holding up to it. And as a Swiss, it's a little bit like, all right, interesting to see the negative sides of politics as well, all around the world.
So it's quite like balanced the power there, right?
Oh yeah.
Citizens are just empowered, and by having direct democratic rights, the citizens are much more powerful, and the politicians cannot just live in their own bubble. Also, being a member of parliament is a part-time job in Switzerland. So people are still in the jobs that they had before entering parliament, which helps a lot to keep them connected to the real world and the real world's problems, and not just us being politicians being in a bubble and we are overpaid and we have no idea what's going on in the real world. So I think there are a number of aspects that really help to strengthen the citizens in the political process of Switzerland.
And what led you to pursue a career definitely in politics? What was the motivation that you had personally to say, all right, I'm going to do it part-time?
So I got interested in politics when I was 14 or 15 years old, still living in Mongolia at the time. At that time,
very young age.
Yeah, it was a very young age, and so the interest for politics was just there, like since that age. And I have a strong passion to see justice in the world. So one of my focus in my political work is also combating human trafficking, which also is a big problem in Switzerland. And then, of course, the whole injustices with the fiat financial system. And these things, they move me, and I want to be able to affect a change in society for the better. And I think being a member of parliament is it's a beautiful job. I think, like in most countries, many people go into politics to get rich quickly. But I think in Switzerland, it's most people go into politics because they really want to achieve something good for the country. Whether they have the right ideology is another question, but I think the motivation is quite good in Switzerland because also of the incentives in our political system.
And do you have another job? Because you said that you have like part-time jobs.
Yes, so I studied political science and I worked for my political party part-time, but I am also self-employed, so I do translation work, German-English, and I help people to exit the fiat system by providing education about the benefits of gold, silver, and Bitcoin. So most people I know, they are not at the point where they go all in Bitcoin. I show them also with gold and silver, which have a very, very good track record over millennia. I show them how to get their savings out of the banking system. And by diversifying with gold, silver, and Bitcoin, I think most people are confident enough to invest also a significant amount of their wealth in Bitcoin.
When you understand for the first time the value of Bitcoin, I'm not talking the monetary value, I'm talking more about the technical aspects and all the benefits that it has this new technology. Well, this question is for both of you. Samuel, if you want to go first.
I think when I read the Bitcoin standard in 2020, that was the time I think I started to begin to understand Bitcoin at the level that was significant for me. Before, I was interested for 4 or 5, 6 years. I did some research, but it didn't fully make a click.
That's awesome. And what about you, Joel?
So for me, using it as money was in 2013. I had to send money to a friend in another part of the world, and essentially this was the only option, or the only cheap option. And I then used it for 4 years, really as that digital money, and I don't need a debit card, and I don't need to ask for permission. And then 2016, 2017, more or less, was the time when I went into literature, and you had more books, you had more content around the topic. And that's when you get into the whole revolution aspect, let's call it, where it's not just an investment, but it's actually something that can change the world for good.
That's quite interesting that you mentioned that you had to send money, because that's one of the main things that changed from day to night in El Salvador. At least the people that were aware about Bitcoin when we made a legal tender, that was one of the advantages, that you don't have to go to a third party to send the money, right? And because the fees are quite high, and when you send it on Bitcoin, you can send it online, or if there's a good amount, you can do it on layer 1. The fees are really low. You can use it. We have a legal tender, and I think that's one of the amazing things that changed in El Salvador. Samuel, I want to ask you about your the educational efforts that you're undertaking to inform to the parliament member about Bitcoin. I know that you have politics in general, that they have like a few short minutes to learn about different topics, right? So I don't know if you have different efforts, for example, like I know that they have in Germany to educate about Bitcoin. I know a little bit because of Julian, but if you can share a bit about how is your work there inside there.
Sure. So you mentioned Germany, and Joanna Kotar is doing an amazing work there. Very professional. She also has a number of staff people, which we don't in Switzerland, so we don't really have staff. So we do it in our free time. But Joanna is doing a great work in Germany. I myself started to be, as I mentioned, very open about Bitcoin in 2021, and I started to do free online webinars about once a month, just for whoever was interested. And in 2021, I also started the parliamentary group Bitcoin. So I looked around in Parliament and I asked around, is there anyone interested in Bitcoin? Then I gathered them together, and those were like 3 or 4 people at the beginning. Now we are more than 20 out of 160 members of Parliament. And so from time to time, we do a lunch event for fellow MPs. We invite them for lunch, and then we invite people to talk about Bitcoin, like Julian from Relay. And we also had Dennis Porter and an assistant of his on an online call that was 2 weeks ago, talking to us about the strategic Bitcoin reserves in the US. And then, basically it's just trying to come into conversation with fellow MPs, see what their knowledge level is, see what they want to know. And the past year has been quite amazing because the interest in Bitcoin really started to grow very strong, and which was also in part due to 4 political motions we put forward to Parliament, which we put forward in March, and now in December the Parliament had the debate about those 4 things, and we were able to pass one of those 4. But of course, the whole thing led to a lot of debate, and I was invited by the largest political party in our canton to talk about Bitcoin at their party meeting. I had 15 minutes. So I told them, I'm very grateful that you're giving me 5 times as much time as Microsoft gave to Michael Saylor. And within that presentation, I think I was able to convince the whole, not the whole party, but the majority of the party, which was a bit critical before, to be now the majority to be in favor of pro-Bitcoin legislation. So it's step by step, and actually the votes on the 3 ideas or proposals that we put forward that did not pass, it was quite close. So we almost had a majority for that, and this shows me that Bitcoin adoption is really picking up speed, and people want to inform themselves, and once they get good information, most of them are very open to Bitcoin then once they really are open to receive high quality information.
I'm just curious, is the biggest party the SP, the Social Democrats?
No, it's the Swiss People's Party, the SVP, which
Really?
is like national conservative, yes.
Okay, because now my follow-up would be, is also the mood changing along more the left-leaning politicians? Because I remember still living in Bern, especially the city is very left-leaning. I would even argue hardcore left-leaning. And there was always, this pushback against Bitcoin. Is that perception also changing?
To a very small degree.
Okay.
So we have been able, in the whole political debate, to say again and again that there are positive aspects to Bitcoin, that there are a lot of positive aspects to Bitcoin, especially also on the environmental side. But the problem is that this has been their argument against Bitcoin for so many years. And now this guy from another political party comes and tells them, well, Bitcoin is actually good for the environment and you should be in favor. It's like if you've been wrong for many years, it requires a certain amount of humility to correct your opinions, especially if those information they come from a political party maybe you don't like that much. And so I think there are a few people on the left-leaning political side that are open for Bitcoin, but they are not open about it. So they might tell me personally, my son told me to buy Bitcoin 4 or 5 years ago, and look at my wallet here. But they tell me I cannot tell the others in the Green Party or so. So of course, there's some exceptions, but mostly there's the traditional FAT arguments that they are still very strong. I mean, they were strong in the other parties as well, but the other parties, they were open to educate themselves this year. Once they were educated and realized that, well, there are good arguments against the FAT, then they were more open to change their mind.
Interesting. Yeah, you also mentioned that, before continuing on that you passed one of 4 proposals, right? So I think the one you want do like a report of the potential of Bitcoin mining to stabilize the energy grid, right? There in Switzerland.
Yes. And to examine where we could produce more energy but don't because of the dynamics of the electricity market. Yeah.
And can you elaborate a little bit more about that specific proposal? And then if you can tell us a bit about the other 3, what are they?
Sure. So the government was actually against all 4 proposals we put forward, also the one in which we called on the government to do a report about the potential of Bitcoin mining. But we had some good co-sponsors for that proposal, especially one. The main sponsor of that proposal is like a very good expert on all matters of energy, and he's from the Green Liberal Party. So they are a bit more pragmatic than the left-wing Greens, but because he was able to win his whole party to support him on that demand to have a report from the government. And many people said, well, we don't know too much yet about Bitcoin, but it couldn't hurt to know more, and so we would like to have that report. So this was probably the easiest proposal to pass. The other 3 were more about really having a proactive Bitcoin strategy as a canton. The first demand was that people could voluntarily pay their taxes in Bitcoin, which would be just a signal to the population Bitcoin is something serious. This is not just a joke or a scam, but it is actually something so trustworthy that even the government is willing to accept Bitcoin as a method of payment. And the second proposal was that state employees, including members of parliament, could receive a part of their salary in Bitcoin, which again would have been a signal. I mean, there is not a big deal to it. I mean, of course, you can just get your salary in Swiss franc and then convert it to Bitcoin afterwards, but it would have been a signal that our canton is doing a proactive Bitcoin strategy. And the last proposal was a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and also encouraging the state's pension funds to allocate a part of their portfolio to Bitcoin, as some of the pension funds in the United States and other countries have started doing so. For these 3 proposals, we narrowly missed the majority.
Were you able to pinpoint what the issues were with, because I seen the vote, it was very narrow for all of the listeners. It wasn't just we were 50% off. It was literally less than 10% maybe. Do you think in the next round you can maybe convince certain individuals better, or maybe form the explanations a bit better, or work a bit on the bill? Or are there common grounds where you say okay, if we do this better next time?
Cuando dejas tus activos digitales en un exchange o en custodia de alguien más, te expones a riesgos de terceros no deseados. A diferencia del sistema bancario tradicional, Bitcoin te permite tomar el control total de tus fondos utilizando tus propias claves privadas. Esto te permite ser soberano y esencialmente tu propio banco. Al tomar el control de tus Bitcoins, puedes evitar riesgos innecesarios de terceros. Almacenar tus Bitcoin en custodia de terceros, como los exchanges, puede exponerte a ataques de actores malintencionados, gobiernos o estafadores que lo único que quieren es apoderarse de tu dinero. Las billeteras de hardware aumentan la seguridad de tu billetera porque tus claves privadas se almacenan en un dispositivo especializado que no está siempre conectado al Internet. Como te he dicho antes, mantener tus claves almacenadas en un dispositivo en línea puede exponerte a factores adicionales de ataque, por lo que se recomienda usar una billetera de hardware al almacenar grandes cantidades de Bitcoin durante largos periodos de tiempo. Jade es una billetera de hardware no custodial para Bitcoins y Liquid que ofrece opciones de firma simple y firmas múltiples. Yo personalmente lo utilizo para almacenar mis Bitcoins, ya que me siento mucho más seguro manteniendo mis Bitcoins en una billetera fría que en una almacenada, por ejemplo, en mi teléfono. Si estás pensando en adquirir uno para ti, no olvides utilizar el código de descuento de nuestro show, BitCorner Podcast. De esta forma estarás apoyando directamente el show y además obtendrás un 10% de descuento para la compra de tu billetera fría.
Yeah, so there are 5 center to center-right parties in the parliament, and then there are 3 left Green parties, and the 5 center to center-right parties the majority were no, actually one was a minority, was in favor, but the 4 other ones there was a majority in favor of these 3 proposals, but there were too many who did not follow the majority line and ended up saying no. And also people told me from 2 important parties that they were almost unanimously for the proposals, but then there ended up being too many no-sayers. Like in the biggest party, 8 people voted against it, and in the Free Democratic Party, the FDP, 5 MPs voted against our proposals, and we would have needed 6 who voted no to vote yes, and then we would have had the majority. So I thought that I had the votes actually, but also in the debate, there were the classic FUD arguments again. We had some very good things people said, but also some really ridiculously bad stuff that was said about Bitcoin. And what also was a bit of a challenge is that our finance director was against all of those proposals. So she, in the name of the government, she said that we should reject them. And so we missed this time, but as we all know, numbers should go up in the next 1, 2, 3 years. Everyone who voted no will be in a difficult position the next time when I bring forward those proposals again. I will be in a position to say, well, it would have been good if you had said yes in 2024. Well, we missed the opportunity in that year, but now let's do it now. So I hope to put forward the next proposals in June 2026. That's the next time I'm allowed to.
That was going to be my question. That how often do you do those rounds? But I think one of the advantages that we have now is that we have the track record, right? Because, for example, I was watching the news or something on Twitter. It was the US news that it was somebody, I don't remember from where, but it was like someone that, I think it was from a big company that asked about his portfolio, and the people that manage that big portfolio said like, no, you should invest in Bitcoin and that. Then the time passed, and now we have this track record. Of course, the numbers went up, and now they're claiming, right, in the person that belongs to this big portfolio, like, hey, why you didn't consider Bitcoin? You told me that it's a scam, and now nation states are talking about Bitcoin strategic reserve, etc. Right? So that will be painful because it can even cost their jobs at some point somehow if they don't have the research at least to debate Bitcoin and not just follow the FUD, right? As you mentioned. By the way, which are like the common FUDs that still have in the parliament that you think needs to be worked or educated more on?
So one of the arguments was that Bitcoin is a placebo currency, that it doesn't actually have any real value. And then, of course, the environmental impact and the bad terrorists and the criminals that can use it, as if the terrorists don't use the internet. It's a crazy argument once you think it through. But it's because it's been in the media so often, people then don't think it through themselves. And then, of course, also volatility. One argument was also, why Bitcoin? Why not enabling state employees to receive a part of their salaries in stocks or gold and silver? And then, the challenge to really explain what makes Bitcoin so unique. We tried and we succeeded with many MPs, but we just failed short of a majority to really be able to disprove the FUD.
Yeah, and I think at this point, it's so hard to realize it can be a salary replacement or part of your salary. It can be an investment. It can be a store of value. It can be very different things. You can't do that with it. You can save in a stock. You can save in an ETF. You can potentially get paid in gold coins and either sell it or use it as a store, portions of your salary. So I think there's a lot of education stuff going on that they still don't grasp. And I can imagine especially environmental stuff coming from certain members and certain parties with certain ideas, which are very hard to change their mind. Granted, they did go over their principles in the last couple of years, but that's a different topic, politically speaking. And I think that would expand the scope way too much for this podcast.
By the way, how adaptable is because I was talking yesterday with Dennis, and we were discussing about the Bitcoin strategic reserve. He made it open source. That's why he went there and helped you. How easy is to adapt his proposal, the Bitcoin strategic reserve? Well, in this case, to Switzerland. I think it has to be like common points, right? Proposed, or my question is how adaptable it is so other countries can replicate it.
I think every political system is quite unique, so it would be difficult to just copy-paste his proposals, because usually in Switzerland it's the government that would start a process of proposing a new law or an amendment to a law, and we as members of parliament can say or give the direct or the task to the government to do that. But usually we don't come with fully written law and which is then passed by parliament, but we appeal to the government to change it, and then the government works on it. So that is one difference, for example.
And I think generally speaking also we as a population, Samuel, right, we could gather the 100k valid signatures or votes at this point, and then actually request a national vote on the matter. Whether that's beneficial or not is a different topic, and you can also break it down into regional votes, essentially, like only in certain provinces or cantons, as we call them in Switzerland. So not yet copy-paste with Dennis's initiative, but it's a start. We need to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, but I think in Switzerland with the popular initiative, I think we might be the first country to have it actually in our constitution, which is a big thing, because in El Salvador there's the Bitcoin law, but I don't think it's in the constitution from what I know. But maybe in Suriname with Maya, who hopefully wins the presidency. She might even change the constitution, and then maybe we can put Bitcoin in the constitution there. But otherwise, I'm rooting for Switzerland to be the first mover here.
Yeah, and did you actually know, I was researching this for a video 2 weeks ago. If we were to do this, we would not only be the first country in the world that obviously puts Bitcoin into the constitution, but generally speaking, alternative form of money, which is not commodity backed or fiat currency. So also in that regard, we would be pioneers. And I guess by a long shot, maybe then Suriname follows, but then who else is to follow? So that'd be quite cool if we could get there. And from the looks of it, we're not very far away with so little votes actually getting the ball rolling.
It's still a big effort. 100,000 valid signatures. But you will help us, okay? Relay. We'll put it in every newsletter you send out. Just at the bottom of the newsletter, remind people of course, you have to.
Listen, I have a bigger marketing budget next year, so I could work on something.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, the industry really needs to get behind it too.
Absolutely. No, I was just looking if it was part of the constitution. I remember that it wasn't. It's a separate piece of legislation that we put in the legislative assembly. So yeah. But yeah, talking about Maya, probably she will also manage to do that. I don't know, but probably Suriname is going to be the second country to make it legal tender. I mean, she's the only one that I know that is talking about make it legal tender, because it's quite different than what your guys are doing,
yes.
Or even in the United States, right? Yeah. Even Dennis told me that it's quite difficult because we managed to do that because, first of all, Bukele is so popular, and the second one because he has the majority power in the parliament. Even he told me that even if he has most of the power in the parliament, but he wasn't being that popular as he is, it could be really difficult to pass the law because, in the end, it's a lot of risk what they're putting. Of course, in the end, no, right? But it's quite interesting the risk that you're putting you as a politician, the president, to pass a law like this. So he told me that it's quite difficult to replicate that. Yeah. But we will see.
He was really very early with 2000 the education was not there for the population to support it. So he had to spend political capital for Bitcoin to make this law. And he was able to do that because he otherwise is already doing a very good job, which is recognized by the citizens. So he has that worldwide almost best approval rating. And so he had the political capital to pull it off, which most other politicians don't have.
Absolutely. Another question that I want to make you is that I'm sure that El Salvador has been in the eyes of the world, so you probably have been looking at how we're developing it. Is there any lessons that you have learned in the process, or the challenges that we have? Because at the end, we're the first mover, right? So there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of things to improve. Even you mentioned the education part. Nowadays, we're still on that road. That's why this podcast exists. That's why Mi Primer Bitcoin exists. That's why No Nation exists. There's a lot of efforts, not just make it a law and everyone suddenly will understand or adopt Bitcoin, right? So what have you, if there's something that you have learned or that you have shared with your co-workers in the parliament that maybe you can replicate or make it even better there?
Well, we're not in that point already where we can implement a pro-Bitcoin strategy right now in our canton, so I haven't thought that much about what you did and how. It's a bit different also because we are a province, we're not a nation state, so we cannot make a Bitcoin legal tender. But I think what really is good that it's just besides the US dollar and that people have the choice. Also, I think it's important that there's not a fine for companies that don't accept Bitcoin, like that it's not really forced upon them. I think it's good to say, let's use it, or if you're able to, then please accept Bitcoin payments. But I think it's important not to enforce it too much, because at the end, it's also, Bitcoin is about freedom, and so you should use Bitcoin on a voluntary basis.
Yeah. Even, the recent news that we have saw that the IMF was talking with Bukele, and they said like, okay, we're going to give you this money, but if you don't force to use Bitcoin in El Salvador. I remember that I was reading that, it was like, but it was never enforced. It's like you can pay in Bitcoin if you want to. It's just volunteers.
Wasn't it semi-enforced that businesses had to have a Bitcoin option? They did not need to use it, but they had to have the option. And I think that's what they had to remove in the 7th article of the law or something, for them to get the money from the IMF. Which I would support this. I have never thought I would actually support the IMF, but my 2 cents would be to never use political force as a means of adoption. You can use this with the wallet, you can use this with these services. I think it should be optional, like Samuel said. If people want to use Bitcoin, happy to do so. We have many great Bitcoin businesses in Switzerland already helping you set up. But I think in that case in El Salvador, it was really like semi-optional. It was encouraged to actually tell people to use Bitcoin, but now they got rid of it, which is also a benefit. We shall see what happens.
I don't know. What I understood is that, I'm not sure about this, that probably you had to have the POS machine, because in the end, it's like, so for example, we're in Europe, right? So for example, someone that goes to Europe and pay in euros, they can convert it. The merchant can accept it and convert it with the POS as Bitcoin or as dollars, right? Because we have dollars. So it's the same thing. That's why I think in that part is volunteer, but the other one, actually, I don't know. So I had to ask about that. Yeah. So I have no idea. In that case, I understand that, and I agree about that as well, because no, everyone has the resources, right, to accept it. In the end, if you're a small business, probably you don't have some way to use a POS machine, or, well, you can use a Bitcoin wallet. I don't know. I had to dig into it.
Yeah, I think this is where we as businesses can come in. And I think this would also be one of the key learnings from El Salvador. Having local Bitcoin businesses really stepping up and then getting to speak to politicians, speak to the various committees, and actually being of a helpful hand, and not sort of, the typical ANCAP Bitcoiner who goes like, oh, I don't want to really work with these guys. If we already want to support the movement, we also have to bring a lot to our table. which is a bit easier in Switzerland because there are already existing Bitcoin businesses that are thriving. In El Salvador, obviously, everything was so new and fresh. You did not have that option yet. But from what I've heard, it's also changing. We would already have a step up there. We would just need to speak more to Samuel in this case and his colleagues to make the transition a bit more easier and to have options. I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah. By the way, why hasn't the Swiss National Bank adopted Bitcoin yet?
We read today in a financial news site that Switzerland by proxy, or the Swiss National Bank by proxy, owns about 500 Bitcoin through having stocks in MicroStrategy and Mara Mining and Tesla. Maybe this is their way of tipping the toe into the water with regard to Bitcoin, that they buy some shares of MicroStrategy.
And I can tell you from having spoken to a few people at the National Bank, there are two key issues for them. The technological hurdles, if that makes sense. They did not really understand multi-sig. They did not understand the different ways of securing your holdings. They do not want to trust a third party. So I count this as very bullish. So they don't want to use Coinbase, for example. And then the second one was more of an asset performance. They want to get in when volatility is less than 30%. I made the argument, measured in what? In, I don't know, Australian dollars, in US dollars, in Swiss francs, or in gold. You know, everyone has its own volatility. So a little bit of a BS argument, in my opinion, but, you know, we're not far away, as like Samuel said, if the proxy's there, to actually go in and say like, hey, now you can get the real deal. And who knows, especially if like America or the Middle East or someone moves first, Switzerland has usually been the next one to follow.
Yes, and I also expect the central bank to actually move before our populish initiative comes to the vote. So for us, it's doing this initiative is more of a way to orange pill the people, the citizens, and to signal to the central bank that there's really a political movement behind Bitcoin, and to encourage them to make that step. But until it comes to the national vote, it will probably take another 4 years. So I think by then they will make the move anyway. So it's more of a tool to actually launch the political discussion nationwide.
Interesting. Samuel, I told you that in the podcast we have this little game. Probably it should be time because we're going to start wrap it up in a moment. So guys, as you usually know, if it is the first time that you're watching this podcast, my previous guest, which is Dennis Porter, I have a prepared question for my next guest, that this time is Samuel. So he has a question for you. And in this case, Joel is also here. So you both guys will have the opportunity to make the question for my next guest. But yeah, I'm going to share with you guys the question that Dennis has for you.
Hey, Samuel, great to see you again. Hasn't been that long. Excited that you're coming on here right after me to talk about what you've done in Switzerland. Congratulations on all the progress you've made there. You're showing true leadership for the people in Europe who need to have leadership. They need someone to show them that they can get things done with Bitcoin. So my question to you would be, how quickly are we going to get the 100,000 signatures that we need? Are we going to get it on the deadline, or are we going to get it before the deadline? You know, I will have to say, I think we can get it done, but I'm curious to hear how quickly you think we can get it done.
Okay, so for context, we have 18 months time, 1.5 years, which is quite good. And of course, the quicker we are in getting these signatures and having them verified, the sooner the vote can take place. And of course, we are motivated to have them quicker than in 18 months. Having been involved with different popular initiatives over the past 20 years in my political engagement, I also know that it is quite a challenge. So I think it will depend how much the Swiss Bitcoin community is on board with this idea, how much they are willing to sacrifice their time and their efforts, and how much also the Bitcoin companies are on board. And then if this is the case, and people go out into the streets to gather signatures and put up an effort, then yes, we will get them before that deadline.
That's awesome. By the way, I have to talk with Joanna Gotthard. I mean, she's, as you mentioned previously, that she's doing a great job. I mean, she have a staff that is helping her, but probably to know, I don't know, some tips or tricks to bring more attention into politics or in the population as well for Bitcoin. That would be great. Joel, I don't know if you want to add something.
I mean, in terms of the business sector, we're ready. If we get the infos, I can shoot a video tomorrow about this. So I'm eager to help out. And again, as I mentioned, I think a lot of us need to step up now and also show the population, the political parties, that it's not just a weird internet money thing. It actually also has business use cases. It has people working in it. It has people committing their time, the most scarce asset, in my opinion, to actually getting this done. So the more we can do this and co-align and get involved, I think the faster we can be before the 18 months deadline. At least that's what I'm telling me. I tend to be a bit over bullish with these kind of things.
That's awesome. Guys, we're gonna finish the podcast. So I don't know if you want to add anything that probably I didn't ask and it's important. This is the time. I don't know.
I hope to visit El Salvador soon. I haven't been there, but I'm really looking forward. It's amazing to see from abroad the transformation that has taken place, hearing so many good things. So I really am looking forward to visit.
You will be very welcome.
Nice. It's a very lovely place. I've been twice, way before Bukele and last November. And you can definitely see the change and the enthusiasm. Eager to get back as well for the third time.
Oh, hold on. I cannot stop the podcast here. I need to know right now your experience there. You can share a bit about that. I'm sure Samuel is also curious about that. How was your experience previously and then post, now that you have seen the change and the development there?
Sure. I just need to wait for a few people to pass, so it's not too loud.
Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry.
They should be gone any minute now. So I was there in 2018, which was at the peak of the what's the name of the major gangs? The M13, I think it was. MS13, yeah, exactly. So I was there for a report. Did interviews. We had bodyguards. It was from the media outlet I worked at. So I was protected, but you were still scared. And a lot of people locally were scared.
You made an interview to them.
Yes, I did. I did interview 2 leaders, which was also an experience. Them telling me how they rape people, kill people if they don't like them or something. No mentions of an economy, no mentions of security. And now in November 2023, when I was there last time, totally different ball game. I visited the same neighborhoods where I was before. Beforehand, it was closed off. It was very dangerous. You had people with guns running around, and these days it's just a normal neighborhood. Like, people go out for groceries, they eat and drink outside. So very vastly different. Bitcoin adoption is there. It's not everywhere as we expect. It does take time, but it's growing. Yeah, if you speak about, Bukele, if you speak about what Bitcoin did for the country, if they think it's going to change, if there's going to be different things in the future, they're very open, they're very positive about everything, and they're really looking forward for the future. So that were my key takeaways compared to when I was there last time. It was really like day and night. The night being the bad thing and the days now being the positive state we see the country in right now.
I have 2 questions about that. One is why you made the interview. I mean, what was the purpose behind that?
The main coverage was the most dangerous places on earth where gangs and things have control. So that's where El Salvador was at the top of the list.
It was definitely.
Yeah, just part of what I did back in the days, and I guess you sit down and talk to a ringleader or someone who kills people just for fun. So that was quite an experience. I was glad to never have to talk to him again. Let's call it this way. And I was glad to not see him again for my second visit.
That's awesome. And my second question is, if you have been there twice, what is your favorite pupusa? I'm sure that you have tasted pupusas.
I did taste them. I have to be honest, I had quite a bad reaction every time I had a pupusa. I got terrible stomach pains, but I really enjoyed the ones with, there was one with goat cheese, pepper, I think jalapenos. That one was really nice. Yeah, you get them at every street corner. So, you never have to worry for
probably
selection.
because it has a lot of calories, that's why. So Samuel, when you go to El Salvador, be careful.
It was very fatty and, these kind of things. But, I mean, you can try everything out. Vegetarian, meat, just with cheese. I heard people say they like that for breakfast. So definitely something to try out.
Absolutely. All right, guys, I'll let you go. I know that you have a flight, and Samuel, you also need to work. Again, finally, where can people find you if want to reach out to you, to Samuel, and you as well, Joel?
Well, I'm most active on X, but also I'm on Facebook, I'm on Damus, Noster, but mostly X. And I actually do have to go in 2 minutes to be on Dennis Porter's announcement on X about some strategic reserve thing coming up.
Cool.
That's awesome.
I'm on X as well. Like, that's the easiest place to go. So we keep it short.
All right, guys, thank you very much. I'll let you go and see you next time.
Thank you. Same to you. It was a pleasure.
See you then. Yeah. Bye-bye.
So, ciao.
Ciao.